Welcome this afternoon to part 2. We remember, I'll summarise very quickly part 1. Part 1 of Daniel chapter 11 showed us historic and what else? Literal fulfillment. We went through Medo-Persia. Verse 3, it was changed to Greece. How do we know that? Because in verse 3 it said, another power arose that did according to its will. And then in verse 16, that power was Greece. In verse 16, we had a transition of power again, because it says in verse 16, he did according to his will, signifying another new power came on the scene at that time. And what was that power? Pagan Rome. So far it's perfectly, literally consistent with the symbols of the statue of Daniel 2 and the symbols of the beasts in Daniel chapter 7 and the beasts in Daniel chapter 8. That's the he-goat and the ram. And so we came down to verse 31 at the end of pagan Rome, and we saw in verse 31 the transition of power from pagan Rome to papal Rome. And then we saw the 1260 years of persecution, which would indicate to us that our interpretation of verse 31 was correct, because we mentioned, remember, that if this was a transition of power from the daily, which was paganism at the hands of the union of church and state, France and the papacy, and then we saw the persecutions after that, and it was for many days, which we interpreted as 1260 days. And of course, note one thing, the papacy was not called at that time the King of the North. It was called what? The abomination that maketh desolate. And then it came in 538 AD in verse 31. We saw the persecutions all the way through to verse 35. And then in verse 36, we comes down in verse 35 till the time of the end. In verse 36, we saw another king about that time, which was 1798, raise up. Now, some learned gentlemen thought that was the United States, but we managed to convince him that it wasn't. It was an ungodly power, mainly atheistic France. And so then we had that new power was described. So from verse 36 all the way through to verse 39, we had a description of that new power. And remember, every part of that new power was fulfilled by atheistic France, even down to the dividing of the land amongst the peasants for gain, as it said in verse 39. And so from verse 36 to 39, we had what? The identification of this new power. And then in verse 40, which we'll start the afternoon's meeting with, at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. Many think here that the king of the north is the papacy, and atheism is the king of the south. Well, you're going to find out. Remember, the whole chapter so far has been what? Literal and historic. And I believe you're going to see some amazing literal fulfillments, exact fulfillments of prophecy, which discredits some of the interpretations that bring in symbolism here. Let's go on. At the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him. When is the time of the end? 1798. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him. Who's him? Him is this power we've just had described from verse 36 to 39, atheistic France. And who's the king of the south? Egypt. Always was. Remember from the verses earlier, from verse 3 through to 16. And so there's a literal fulfillment. But my argument falls flat on its face if atheistic France was not in Egypt in 1798. Was atheistic France in Egypt in 1798? exactly it was. Not 1797 or 1787. It was 1798, the time of the end. So at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him. We saw Napoleon, and we're going to find out why he went there. Napoleon attacked Egypt under the excuse that French traders had been victimized and persecuted by the Mamelukes that ran Egypt. And so they took 40,000 troops in there on 350 ships, and they conquered. You'll find out the king of the south pushed feebly at him and was defeated at the Battle of the Pyramid. See this? So this is history. I'm surprised at the number of Adventist scholars that have never read the book of Daniel and the Revelation, because they've said, oh, we don't read that because he was a Unitarian. He was a Unitarian, but I don't care. Sister White made it clear that God had helped him write that book, and you'll see at the end of the presentation that she said it should be shared with people because it's been blessed of God. So the king of the south pushed at him exactly in 1798. So I am impressed, and I hope you are too, that so far we have an exact fulfillment. So Napoleon defeated the Egyptians. Then Napoleon advances east towards the promised land. Why did Napoleon advance east towards the promised land? You'll be astounded at what you see here. Napoleon Bonaparte was a what? Freemason. Now, you see the hand and the jacket? When you see that in a ceremony, it shows that the person is a Freemason. So let's read on. Napoleon Bonaparte was a Freemason, and their objective is to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem for their secret controllers, the Jewish bankers, who financed the French Revolution. It now was payback time for the realization of the age-old Jewish prayer and dream, next year Jerusalem. So the Jewish bankers had financed the French Revolution to destroy the union of church and state, which had persecuted them. But now we see it also brings us back to the hope of Israel. For who of all people should suddenly declare himself the sponsor of a restored temporal kingdom of the Jews but General Bonaparte? Among all the other records set by this astonishing man is a little-known fact that he was the first head of state to propose the restoration of a Jewish state in Palestine. So why was Napoleon heading east? To take Jerusalem, so the Jews could go there and rebuild their temple. Bonaparte has published a proclamation in which he invites all the Jews of Asia and Africa to gather under his flag in order to re-establish the ancient Jerusalem. He has already given arms to a great number, and their battalions threaten Aleppo. In Napoleon's latest report to the Directory, just an hour before he set out for Palestine, he confidently predicted, by the time you read this letter, it is possible I will be standing at the ruins of Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem. And so he set off there, but what did the Bible say? The king of the south would push at him. Who's him? The power that had been described from verse 36 to 39 that did according to its will in 1798, which could not be the papacy because it had received the wound. And the king of the north shall come against him like a what? Whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships. Daniel 11:40. And so the French army under Napoleon, after their stunning victory at the Battle of the Pyramids, marches east, intending to capture the temple site in the Holy Land for the Jewish immigrants, for Jewish immigration. The Ottoman Muslim Empire comes like a whirlwind with 100,000 horsemen against the French army at the siege of Accra in March 1799. To avoid annihilation, the French retreat in haste to Egypt. There's the Battle of Accra, which was the port and the key to the capture of Jerusalem. So we saw the sure word of prophecy. The king of the north came against him like a whirlwind with horses. And there they are. And the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind with chariots and what? With horsemen. 11:41. And then we have the British and Russian navies help the king of the north by blockading the French at the siege of Accra. So Britain and Russia united because they didn't want France to take over the Middle East. So your enemies are my enemies. And the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, we saw that, and with horsemen, and with many ships. So those ships were British and Russian ships, as well as a few Turkish ships. And then we got, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen, and with many ships. So the king of the north came as a whirlwind and drove Napoleon. He had to do an about turn there and take off back and leave Egypt. Napoleon and his army retreat to Egypt from Palestine, while the Ottoman Muslim king of the north attack his rear guard like a whirlwind. And he shall enter also into the glorious land. Who's he there? The king of the north. He shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these that overthrown many fields instead of countries should be but those shall escape out of his hand. But these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab and the chief of the children of Ammon. Does anybody know what those nations are? What nation is in that area today? Jordan. That's Jordan in the east. So this king of the north was not interested in conquering through the hills going east. He wanted to get France out of the area. And so Edom, Moab and Ammon, lying outside the limits of Palestine, south and east of the Dead Sea, and the Jordan, were out of the line of march of the Turks into Syria and Egypt, and so escaped the ravage of the campaign. And so Ammon, Moab and Edom were spared. And this is what else it says. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. So the Bible said 2,500 years that Egypt would be taken. But it also says, the king of the north conquers Egypt. When the French were driven out of Egypt and the Turks took possession, the Sultan permitted the Egyptians to reorganize their government as it was before the French invasion. Daniel in Revelation 3:09 by Uriah Smith. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. We're seeing an exact, amazing, literal fulfillment of this prophecy, and how people can have such an imagination to try and interpret Edom, Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon defies my imagination. I ask them, what is Edom? They say, Edom means unfaithfulness. And what about Ammon? That means arrogance. And what about Moab? That means pride. It's nonsense, as you'll find out in a moment. And yet most Adventist scholars believe that. Now, I'm trying not to cause trouble, but there's a reason why the correct interpretation must be given, because it's a wake-up call for Seventh-day Adventists, as you'll find out. The Sultan, after neither soldiers, guns nor fortification, and left them to manage their own affairs with the important exception of tribute. That's from Daniel in the Revelation 2. And so they paid tribute. So Egypt was taken, but can you see here, Libya and Ethiopia were not taken. Can you see this an exact literal fulfillment of this verse, that the king of the south pushed at him the power that had been explained, revolutionary France, atheistic France, militant atheism, which came to Egypt, and it was in verses 36 to 39, it was explained or identified as an atheistic power. The king of the south pushed at him. He was defeated by this atheistic French. France moved to the promised land. The king of the north came at him like a whirlwind and took Egypt, but took the promised land. But Ammon, Edom and Moab escaped, as did Libya and Ethiopia. That was told 2,500 years ago by Daniel the prophet. Can you see that this is an amazing, literal, exact fulfillment? Would we not expect an exact fulfillment? Because God said, I am not the author of confusion. 1 Corinthians 14:33. So let's push on. While the Ottomans, king of the north, conquered Egypt, they never conquered Ethiopia and Libya, just as the Bible predicted. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to make away. Now this is amazing prediction. Tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Who's him? Him is a nondescriptive noun, but it tells us it's not a definite article. So therefore, we've got to determine who him is. I'm going to say that him is the Muslim world led by the Ottoman Empire at the time. And therefore, they had to be attacked from the east and the north. And people said this, a remarkable prediction comes true. Dr. Clark had a note which is worthy of mention. He says this part of the prophecy is allowed to be yet unfulfilled. His note was printed in 1825. In another portion of his comment, he says, if the Turkish power is understood as the preceding verse, it may mean that the Persians on the east and the Russians on the north will at some time greatly embarrass the Ottoman government. Between this conjecture of Dr. Clark's, written in 1825, and the Crimean War of 1856, there is certainly a striking coincidence, inasmuch as the very powers he mentioned, the Persians on the east and the Russians on the north, were the ones which instigated the conflict. So was there a war? The Bible predicted 2,500 years ago that Russia and Persia would attack the Ottomans, the Muslim world. Did that happen? We just read it in the Crimean War of 1853. This was predicted in 1825, and many atheists were amazed at the literal fulfillment of these prophecies. And so in 1853 to 56, the Russians and the Persians attacked the Ottoman Empire. That was the Crimean War described in the Bible. But tidings out of the east and the north shall trouble him. The Russians from the north attacked the Muslim Ottoman Empire. And there we go. The Russians attack down through there, Romania and in there, and then the king of the north comes up here, and then the Persians come from here, and the Russians came from the east as well. And so there was an exact fulfillment. Was the British helping the Turks? Yes, they did. They came to the aid of the Turks, as did the French. And what was the famous battle we learnt when we were children? The charge of the Light Brigade. And they captured, it was a suicidal attack, but they captured what? The Russian guns, and all the VCs are made from those Russian cannon. Did you know that? And he shall plant the tabernacle. This, we're getting towards the end. He shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. So, and he shall plant the tabernacle. Who's he? The Muslim world. Now, he will plant the tabernacles. What does tabernacles mean? The mosques. But what does tabernacles mean? It means more than one. And he's going to plant them in the glorious holy mountain, which is Jerusalem, and it's going to be between the seas, right? Which are the seas? Mediterranean and the Dead Sea. Now you're going to see an amazing exact fulfillment here. There's Jerusalem, the holy mountain. There's the seas, the Dead Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. So we're going to look here and see if our power, which we believe is the Muslim world, did build at least 2 tabernacles. And there it is, the dome of the mosque. There it is, see that? And the Mosque of Al-Aqsa. These are the 2 mosques on the holy mountain, just as Daniel 11:25 says. Can you see this? There it is there, the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa. Just as the Bible predicted. It didn't say build its temple, it said temples. And so, can you see it was going to be built in the holy mountain, Jerusalem, between the seas? Can you see so far we have an exact fulfillment? And people try and put a connotation on this which says that the holy temples are God's people and all this. We're seeing an exact literal historic fulfillment. So let's push on. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. What's the next bit? Yet he shall come to his end and none will help him. I believe where rubber's touching the road, it says that the Muslim world is going to come to its end. Now, is that possible? You wait and see, because how many powers are there in the last days? Two, not China. Well, you're entitled to that opinion. I'm saying it's the resurrected papacy, which all the world wondered after, and the United States of America, which rose as a lamb with two horns and spoke as a dragon. And so, they're the two powers. It doesn't say China, under my understanding. It doesn't say Russia. And they're going to, all the world is going to wonder after the beast. So Russia is going to be tamed one way or the other, and so is China. And so are the Muslim world. So let's push on. The Bible says, he shall come to his end and none shall help him. The Muslim world. Look at this. The infamous Wesley Clark. We're going to take out seven countries in 5 years. Starting with what? Iraq, and then Syria, then Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off with what? Iran. Wesley Clark. Why would he say this? Because the Jews are controlling America, and this is all beneficial to the benefit of the Jews. Michael Ledden admits the Zionist plan to destabilize the Muslim world. Stability is an unworthy American mission and a misleading concept to boot. We do not want stability in Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and even Saudi Arabia. We want things to change. The real issue is not whether, but how to destabilize this. This is in the Wall Street Journal. Now look here. This is Woolsey. Woolsey is another Jew. The Jew Woolsey, and former CIA head, wants the US to destroy the Islamic world for Israel's New World Order. Woolsey is now running around this country calling for World War IV, it should be 3, to deal with the Islamic problem. That's the Washington Post, April 15, 2003. Here's the Jew Ledden again, admits the Zionist plan to destroy the Muslim world. I'm not making this up. This is taking from information which is out there, and I believe it's fulfilling biblical prophecy historically, literally, and accurately, and on time. Michael Ledden, a Jew and former U.S. Undersecretary of State, said, the United States is going to change the face of the Middle East. We also spoke in May 2003 of the need to free Iran, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Libya, and North Korea after the invasion of Iraq. Can you see they're openly saying what they plan? Now this is, who's heard of Ron Paul? He's a Republican senator in the United States. He's a doctor by profession, and he's a good guy. Some of my friends have met Ron Paul, and this is what he said. The same foreign policy experts who lied us into the Iraq war are now saying we must re-invade to deal with the disaster caused by their invasion. Get it? Here's Monsignor Antoine Aldo, Bishop of Aleppo. He's a Roman Catholic priest. Behind the jihadists in Syria, there are Turks and Saudis. But the real instigators of this war are the US and Israel. Just like you heard me say the other day, and the head rabbi in Auckland said the Jews are behind the destruction, and they've got a reason. But I'm going to share with you later that the Jews, I believe, are the bad guys. They're going to lead us. You've got to have an antichrist, because the Pope's not the antichrist, remember. He's a good guy now. And we have the bad guys, the Jews, taking over the world, and we're going to see the grassroots movement in Europe and America stand up, bring in Sunday laws to save their heritage as it's been flooded out by Muslim immigration, and then there can be a nuclear war, and Jesus is going to come and save us, right? And Jesus is going to tell us to keep Sunday holy. You get it? Then Jesus is going to set up his new age on this earth, the 1,000 years of peace. And then what's going to happen? When they preach peace and safety, 1 Thessalonians 5, 1-3, sudden destruction comes upon them, because when the 7 last plagues fall, then the people realize they've been conned. So let's see. There is no Al-Qaeda. The truth is there is no Islamic army or terrorist group called Al-Qaeda. Any informed intelligence officer knows this. But there is a propaganda campaign to make the public believe in the presence of an identified entity representing the devil, only in order to drive TV watchers to accept a unified international leadership for a war against terrorism. The country behind this propaganda is the US, and he could have said, if he wasn't so polite, that Israel is controlling America today, and has done for a long time. So America and its wealth and its boys are dying for what Israel wants. But look what happened to Robin Cook, a good guy. Former British Foreign Secretary Robin Cook, who died suddenly while hiking in the Scottish Highlands 1 week after giving this speech. You don't speak against these things. Do you follow me? Let's push on. Out of chaos comes order. That's what the Illuminati says. So they create a war or depression and then sell us our reasoning. What does our friend Stewie say? Problem, reaction, solution. And so out of these troublous times, that's the problem, our fifth objective, a new world order. Do you follow me? So we'll create wars, knock the Middle East out. Look what this guy said, Ariel Sharon. Does anybody know who he was? He was the Prime Minister of Israel. 33 degree, wasn't he? What's that? 33 degree, wasn't he? He was. Israel Prime Minister states Jews control the United States. I didn't make this up. This is recorded in the US Knesset Parliament. Every time we do something, you tell me America will do this and will do that. I want to tell you something very clear. Don't worry about American pressure on Israel. We, the Jewish people, control America, and the Americans know it. You go back and do some research for yourself. Every president of the United States, back to Roosevelt in the 1930s, 70% or 60% at the minimum of all their advisors are Jews. So let's push on. King Faisal doesn't know Kissinger, the Jew, is grinning at him. The day before King Faisal was assassinated, Kissinger left the Middle East. Kissinger is a Jew. He's been running American foreign policy, but he is born in Germany. You want to say, how can a little fat Jew born in Germany grow up to run America? How can Madeleine Albright, another Jewess from Yugoslavia, come into America and run the foreign affairs? Someone's pulling the strings from behind the... Now look, the Greater Israel plan is being fulfilled. According to the founding father of Zionism, Theodor Herzl, the area of the Jewish state stretches from the brook of Egypt, that's the Nile, to the Euphrates. According to Rabbi Fishman, the promised land extends from the river Egypt up to the Euphrates. It includes parts of Syria and Lebanon. They're claiming that land as God's chosen people. But God deserted them when they said, "Let his blood be on us and our children." But the devil is using them to take the spotlight off the heavenly sanctuary. The Greater Israel Project, also known as the Odin-Yinon Plan. And there's war in Iraq, Lebanon, Libya, Syria, Egypt, getting rid of the Mubarak regime, must be understood in relation to the Zionist plan for the Middle East. Greater Israel consists in an area extending from the Nile Valley to the Euphrates. And here, but no democracy for Gaza. They want to replace all the Muslim dictatorships and generals in power with so-called democracies, where their money is put under the IMF and World Jewish banks, and their Muslim money system is destroyed, their gold is stolen from them, and their oil is stolen from them. Do you see what's happening? And so, but they want everyone, including us, to be under a dictatorship, a so-called democracy, where we only have say in what colour the Wellington or Auckland city buses will be and what colour the street signs are going to be. We have no input whatsoever into monetary policy, and they tell us that we are in a democracy. And so they want to replace all these Muslim dictatorships with so-called democracies, but really it's all being run by international Rothschild money. So let's push on. But see here, there's a discrepancy in their law. There's no democracy for Gaza. That's the plan. And it comes from Genesis 15:18. In the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land from the river of Egypt, that's the Nile, unto the great river, the river Euphrates. So that's why one of the reasons they depopulated and destroyed Iraq was eventual Jewish immigration. The United States is financing the Arab Spring projects to force regime change in the Muslim world. Here we see Jewish-controlled US finances the Arab Spring Revolution to subdue the Muslim dictatorships into their democratic New World Order. Now we see who is running America. See the US flag and the Israeli flag? The Jews are running America. The role of the Jews is to wreak destruction, to wage war. Now we see no more corruption in Lebanon. So they finance all these people to come out on the streets. It's done with George Soros. Who's heard of George Soros? George Soros is worth $25 billion. He's behind Black Lives Matter in America. He don't care about the blacks in America. All he's trying to do is get them to raise up to start a war to have them all killed. And it'll be an excuse to destroy democracy and replace it with a dictatorship for our safety. So they're prepared to take freedoms off us and guarantee us safety. Do you follow me? Let's push on now. There we go. All these movements, they got the people on the streets. Regime change coming in Tunisia. Stand up for Tunisia. Go Joe. And so now these all people, they don't know that they're just tools in the whole battle. Do you follow me? They're being financed. The secret money's coming in from the American taxpayer. Game over. CIA financed Arab Spring. There's the previous president. Ex-president gets 35 years jail, but none of the Jews who have corrupted around the world get any court case. Tunisia votes to remove harsh cannabis laws. So what are they trying to replace these regimes? They're trying to destroy the Muslim faith. They want to make homosexuality legal in this liberalized democracy. They want to free the Muslim woman from the slavery they're under, and we can agree with some of those things, but there's a great price to pay for it. I believe we're seeing prophecy come true that this power that built its temple between the seas and the holy mountain, or temples, is coming to its end, and none's going to help it. But the crunch call is in Daniel 12:1. We're going to find out in a moment. So now they've got woman politicians, right, as in the Western democracies. Egypt is next target for change. There we go. Illuminati requires a regime change in Egypt to fit their liberal New World Order. There we go. The people are financed on the street. They don't know what there's Mubarak. He might have been a crook, but they're getting rid of him. Mubarak, you're down, just leave. All power to the people. Democracy, not dictatorship. There's the people. No military rule in Egypt. Democracy. They're not going to get a democracy in the New World Order of the regime. People on the streets. Mubarak gets life in prison. Afghanistan is next to be destroyed. See this? They don't care about the millions that have been blown up and killed. And they're using American soldiers for their end game. See, look at these kids, all little babies. Doesn't matter if they're Muslims. They're still loved by God. And these people are killing them. See them all lined up there? How the angels must weep. But you see, it's getting closer to home, as you found out in Christchurch the other day. But this is an excuse. Not one New Zealander committed any crime. The crime was caused by a so-called Jew in Australia who came to New Zealand. And now we're having our gun laws taken off us. And Julie just told me that the one conservative politician in New Zealand who was going to object to it, they bought it in and passed it while he ducked out for an interview on TV. That's the filth that goes on and the deceit. But I'm glad there's a day of judgment where the judge cannot be bought with gold and silver, and his decision is final. And we've got to make sure we're right with God, because it says in 1 Corinthians 6:4 that we're going to judge angels. Have you read that? And you know it says in Revelation 20 that during the millennium we're going to pass the sentences. So we can't pass sentences if we're not perfect ourselves. And Jesus Christ has provided the way that we might overcome as he overcame. You're going to see the tragedy now in the Middle East. Look at that man, shot up, blowing up. The Americans. Iraq is next to be destroyed. Look at that. We're not seeing this. Miles and miles of just devastation. Why? Because the land must be cleared for the chosen people of God, the Jews, to come in. And that's why they're flooding all the people from here into the Western world. Get rid of it. Now you're going to find out they'll finance anti-Semitism in all the countries to drive the Jews into the promised land. Because they're not going to go unless they get attacked. Do you follow me? Let's go. Here they go, Muslim Iraq destroyed, babies killed, and the little babies, innocent little babies. What does it say in the Bible? It says, if you harm one of these little children, it's best that a millstone is tied around your neck and you're put into the depths of the ocean. God loves all these little children. And we saw in the last week that we have to be ready always to give an answer to the Muslims. They're human beings. They think a bit different from us. And some of them are extremists, but then there's extremists in our own ranks. Particularly when some in the Christendom think they're God on earth and think they have the power to forgive sins. There's a bomb gone off. Look at the people lying there on the streets. Some maimed, some with their clothes stripped off with a bomb. The whole Middle East you saw before is being destabilised. Do you follow me? And this power is coming to their end and none is going to help it. That guy's been hit with a flamethrower. He's just charcoal. See that? Legs and arms blowing off. Look, unbelievable. Half a man. Look, terrible. Now this man is just shooting prisoners. How would you feel if you were here? The gun, he's had a bullet in the head. He's going the other way. They're shooting all these ones. And the ones that are doing the shooting are financed by the CIA. ISIS is financed by the United States in order to give the Muslims a bad name. Car bombs. Now look at here. The US Jew Paul Wolfowitz admits to Congress that they would steal Iraq's gold and silver. There was Paul Wolfowitz before Congress in March 2003 offering Americans the bargain of the century, a free Iraq. Not free as in freedom and democracy, but free in the sense of this won't cost us a penny, Wolfowitz testified. There's a lot of money to pay for this that doesn't have to be US taxpayers' money. And where would these billions come from, Wolfowitz has told us? It starts with the assets of the Iraqi people. The oil revenues of that country could bring between 50 and 100 billion over the next 2 or 3 years. US soldiers posed with part of the 20 trillion of stolen Iraqi gold. They didn't tell you that on the news, did they? They steal their gold, they change their Muslim banking system and force it into the Jewish debt system, and there's the gold. And the American soldiers think they're fighting for their chance. Here's Bennett, another Jew. As US Iraqi governor steals 17 billion of Iraqi's oil money. Where's our missing 17 billion? Iraq government demands return of oil money stolen by the US institutions after 2003, as Wolf said. Look at this. Saddam, Iraq's leader, is executed. So they steal their gold, change their banking system, and kill the dictator. Do you know he wasn't a bad guy? I was in Los Angeles and I met a lady who came from Iran and said, Saddam is tough. If people are shooting people, he hangs them. But is he anti-Christian? No. He bought a grand piano for every Christian church in Iraq. But in the media we're told Hitler is bad and Stalin is Uncle Stalin because he's a Jew, right? And he killed 66 million people. But the media can crucify those that it wishes. And it's going to crucify us one day as legalists. So there we go. Kuwait steal $2 billion worth of Iraq oil. Now, the CIA tricked Saddam into a retaliatory attack on Kuwait, so US then has an excuse for destroying Iraq dictatorship and replacing it with a fake democracy run by international finance. Do you know what the CIA told Saddam? they said, you can take out Kuwait, and we would not risk retaliating because we still remember Vietnam. We don't want to be bogged down. So they did it. Then Libya next to be destroyed. Prosperous Muslim Libya is destroyed. Look at it. Then before and after. Just destroying these Muslim countries. Prosperous Muslim Libya has been turned into chaos by US-funded Muslim terrorist groups. There is Gaddafi. My sister's friend worked for Gaddafi, and she knew him personally. And she said, he was a Muslim, sure, but he was a kind, very well-spoken man. But we're told he's terrible, right? Just like when Pan Am Flight 108, blew up over Lockerbie, he got the blame. But it was done by the CIA. So these are false flag operations. Let's go on. Muslim Libya falls. There's his leader. They did all kinds of corrupt things to him out of hate. There's the gold. Look at it. Who stole the 143 tons of Libya's gold and 150 tons of their silver? Where do you think it ended up? The people that love the money. The Jews got it. That's who got it. Yeah, well, have you not been listening? What's that? Well, you're not a Jew. Well, we are Jews. We're true Jews, right? Look at this. Syria next to be destroyed. The Muslim world is being systematically destroyed and forced into the New World Order. Look at it. The mayhem. All the people were living in there. They've taken them out. They've flooded Europe with them. But this, I'm showing you this so you'll understand that the Muslim world is coming to an end and none are going to help it. So here we go. Look at the mayhem. Isaiah 17:1. The burden of Damascus. Behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap. This is it, friends, a ruinous heap. Look at it. I'm going to go quickly now. Welcome to Damascus. Just mayhem, destruction. There they are, cutting all these guys' throat. Now this guy, Dr. Nabil Antaki from Aleppo, said this. Life was not perfect, but nobody wanted war. They wanted reform. Even the most outspoken enemies of the government did not want war, and certainly not this war. They wanted reforms and they wanted democracy, but nobody wanted to kill Syria to improve Syria. Do you see how it's turned around? They take a legitimate desire and destroy the country with it. Muslim Syria is being systematically destroyed by the New World Order. These little children. There now, Muslim refugees flee to Europe, leaving an empty land for a greater Israel. Syrian refugees seek asylum, but EU are putting hurdles in their way. The White Helmet myth is over. Does anybody know anything about the White Helmets? They're a CIA Mossad operation that is operating as humanitarians. And they were really assassinating people, but the newspaper said how wonderful they are and how they risked their lives to save children. See here, these were staged photos for the White Helmets to see running through with the kids, and everybody was giving money. The White Helmets are a CIA Mossad front for assassination and intelligence gathering. They were said to be humanitarians, but when they're in there, they were gathering intelligence as well. Look at this guy. He's about to have his head chopped off, see? In a moment, his head will be looking up at him. Now here, all these Syrian soldiers are blindfolded and being shot in the head. Unbelievable. This is what Assad said. The West has spent 10 years fighting terrorism. It has killed millions doing so. Now they're supporting the same terrorists in Syria. And I am the bad guy. Iran is next. See this? We are sitting down together with Israel. That are sitting down together with Israel in order to advance the common interest of war with Iran. Iran, they want to take them out next. Look, Israel using US will take out of Iran because it is not fitting their New World Order. I've got to change that heading. Israel using US will take out Iran because it is not fitting their New World Order. At the conference in Warsaw, that's 3 weeks ago, Netanyahu said Israel would be meeting in public with Arab foreign ministers to advance the common interest of war with Iran, according to a tweet from his office. Iran, common interest, the only one who's going to get a benefit out of it is the Jews, right? And it's going to lead, Sister White said in Desire of Ages, page 36, and Great Controversy 36, she said, when the Jews killed Jesus Christ, they changed sides and became the agents of Satan and are responsible for the destruction of this world. Einstein and Oppenheimer and the atom bomb, Freud, who ruined the Christian principles of Protestant America, the Rothschild bankers. What did Satan say to Christ on the mount, on the temple, on the wilderness? This is my world and I can give it to whom I wish. He offered it to Christ and Christ turned it down. So he's giving it to the ones that killed Christ and nailed him to a cross. Let's go. Iran is next. So they get the people on the streets. And Iran, we're going to have a big war there. Look, they're burning US flags and Israeli flags. They know more about what's going on. This is what old Donald, what's his name? Thump. To Iranian President Rouhani, never ever threaten the United States again or you will suffer consequences the likes of which few throughout history has ever suffered before. We are no longer a country that will stand for your demented words of violence and death. Be cautious. America's the aggressor. It's fighting in all over the world. So here they go, the Iranian troops. CIA financed protests in Iran for regime change. Same CIA sponsored protests in Iran. And the Jews of New York are saying no nukes for Iran. But the devil wants Iran to get some nukes because you can't have a good party unless both sides have some booze. Because his whole goal is to create a tragedy and then come as Jesus and speak with a melodious voice and tell people to love each other and be kind and gentle. The Muslim world is coming to its end and none shall help him. Daniel 11:25. Look at this. The mosques being destroyed. Friends, we're living in the last days of Earth's history. Look at the shots through there. Look at the destruction as far as the eye can see. They're deliberately destroying. The Zionist wants the Temple Mount. There he is, taking the temple out, you see, with his ice cream. The Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount. Is this mosque the next to go? Do you know the Jews have tried to blow it up? They want the Temple Mount. They want to rebuild their temple. But I believe God says no. They're not going to rebuild the temple, but they're going to create a nuclear war in their attempt to do so. And there we have the Muslim world is coming to its end and there is a sign that probation is about to close. This is the point. I'm saying that what's happening in the world is a sign that when the Muslim world comes to its end, then probation is about to close. So why Adventists should be interested in what I'm saying here in the Shoreward of prophecy is that probation is about to close. So we're to get ready. Let's read it. And at that time, that's when the Muslims come to its end, shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book of life. Revelation or Daniel 12:1. Human beings put the division in between the chapters. So this verse really was to come in Daniel chapter 11. For then shall be great tribulation, such as not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. For the king of the north is the Muslim world, and if the king of the north is the Muslim world, then God is trying to warn his children through the sure word of prophecy that when we see the Muslim world coming to its end and none helping it, we then know that we should rise from our stupor, for probation is about to close. Now, inspiration says Uriah Smith's book, Daniel and the Revelation, should go everywhere and it will do a grand work. I've taken most of this from this Adventist scholars today. But this is what E.G. White said. I consider that book thoughts on Daniel and the Revelation should go what? Everywhere. It has its place and do a grand good work. Here we go. Inspiration says that Uriah Smith's book, Daniel and the Revelation, contains God's light. Review and Herald, February 16, 1905. Now, inspiration says that angels of God would prepare the people's hearts for Uriah Smith's book, Daniel and the Revelation. There it is. The angels of God would prepare the way for these books in the hearts of the people. So he'll prepare the way when we start talking to Muslims. There is Baudou, A.C. Baudou, James and Sister White's friend, A.C. Baudou, stated the prophet said the angels were guiding Uriah Smith's hands with his book, Daniel and the Revelation. That's not an authoritative statement, but it is a statement from a pioneer. Uriah Smith says bringing in the papacy as the king of the north is so wide of the mark it need not be considered. And yet all our theologians are going after this, and even friends of mine. I used to believe this till dear old Pastor George Burnside sat me down and explained that I was wrong. And nobody likes to be shown they're wrong. But I was convicted of God that I was wrong, and I changed to this. Literal historic fulfillment. We speak of these two positions only as the attempt which some make to bring in the papacy here is so evidently wide of the mark that it need not be considered. Daniel and the Revelation, page 294 by Uriah Smith. 6 biblical reasons why the papacy cannot be the king of the north. 6 biblical reasons. Number 1, the papacy is first mentioned in verse 31 and is called the abomination that maketh desolate, and not the king of the north. Hence the king of the north cannot be the papacy, and logically the king of the north must be another power which arises in history at the time of the end, 1798. Otherwise God is the God of confusion, which he is not. The second reason, the biblical reason why the papacy cannot be the king of the north. Those who believe the papacy is the king of the north claim strongly that because the prophecies of Daniel 2, 7 and 8 all end with the papacy, then Daniel 11 must also end with the papacy. They are making this extravagant claim without a slither of evidence. They are putting God in a box and telling him what he must do. We know that man put the chapter divisions in the Bible and not God. Daniel 12:1 is a flow-on from verse 45 in chapter 11. The papacy finishes in verse 35, which is the time of the end, 1798, and not the close of probation, because the papacy is mentioned after verse 35. God again reminds us in Daniel 12, 7 and 11 about the 1260-year prophecy, the 1290 and the 1335 prophecy. The third biblical reason why the papacy cannot be the king of the north. Those who claim that the papacy is the king of the north must somewhere make a change from literal to symbolic interpretation in order to try and squeeze the papacy into prophecy where it does not fit. They cannot give a correct biblical principle for their change. They cannot all agree to what verse in Daniel 11 the prophecy changes from literal to symbolic. Some claim is it at the cross, verse 22, but there are still literal verses after that. Some claim it starts in verse 40, but they find their credibility is stretched when trying to give a symbolic explanation for Edom, Moab and Ammon, verse 41, which has a perfect literal and historic fulfillment, as does every verse in the chapter. There is often a different symbolic explanation in Australia than in America. They both claim the Holy Spirit gives them their explanations, but the Holy Spirit, once again, is not the author of confusion. The fourth biblical reason why the papacy cannot be the king of the north. The king of the north cannot be the papacy because this power, the Muslim world, verse 45, comes to its end at the close of probation. The papacy does not come to its end until a year later. See Revelation 18:8. What does that say? Once probation closes, the plagues of Rome will fall in what? One day, which I believe is a year. So the plagues are going to fall in a year. So this power cannot be the papacy because it comes to an end when probation closes, when Jesus puts down the censer in the heavenly sanctuary. But if we read on, we find the papacy doesn't come to an end until when? 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, 8-10 shows that the papacy comes to its end after the plagues when it's struck down by the brightness of Christ's coming. Right? This is after she suffers her 7 last plagues, which fall in the year after the close of probation and before the end of the world. Can you see it cannot be the papacy? Another one. We ask our friends, who is this power in Revelation 13, 1-3? They tell us it is the end-time papacy which has recovered from its deadly wound inflicted in 1798, and all the world wondered after her. We ask again, who is this beast in Daniel 11:40? They say it is the same beast, the end-time papacy. We reply it cannot be the papacy because all the world wondered after the papacy in Revelation 13, but in the case of the beast of Daniel 11:40, it was a limited conquest in which Egypt was taken, Libya and Ethiopia were not taken, as was Edom, Moab and Ammon. Amazingly, this prophecy had an exact literal fulfillment when the Muslim Ottoman Empire drove the French out of the Promised Land in 1798 and then latterly in 1799. Here we see, and the king shall do according to its will. At the time of the end, 1798, the Pope was taken prisoner by atheistic France. So the papacy could not do according to his will. So the papacy cannot be the king of the north. The sixth biblical reason why the papacy cannot be the king of the north. In Daniel 11:3, a new power rose and it did according to its will. This indicated a new power arriving on the scene. Greece rose and destroyed Medo-Persia. In Daniel 11:16, another new power rose and did according to its will. Here we see pagan Rome taking over from Greece. In Daniel 11:35, we see another power rising at the time of the end, 1798, and it also did according to its will. This could not be the papacy because the time of the end, 1798, was the very time it could not do according to its will, because the time of the end was the very time the papacy received her deadly wound. The only new power at the time of the end that arose and did according to its will was atheistic France. She then fulfilled literally all the specifications of Bible prophecy from Daniel 11:36-40. The Bible said that at the time of the end, the king of the south would push at him, France. This prophecy came true. For this prophecy to come true, France had to be in Egypt, to be in conflict with Egypt in 1798 at the time of the end. Amazingly, France was in Egypt in 1798, where the king of the south pushed weakly at the French army at the Battle of the Pyramids. Friends, the Muslim world is the king of the north, and a destruction is a sign that probation is about to close. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. Daniel 12:1. Ye can discern the face of the skies, but can you discern the signs of the times? Jesus is coming soon. So friends, I believe we've seen the fulfillment of prophecy. Remember, the prophecies of Daniel, in my understanding, are literal and historic. And there's no place. The vast number of Adventist scholars are interpreting and trying to squeeze and make it fit for the papacy. I don't believe it is, and I believe Adventists should understand this. Why? Because if we value our eternal lives, we will take heed that the world probation is about to close. Because in Daniel chapter 11:45 it says that this power would build its temples, plural, in the holy mountain, Jerusalem, between the seas, Mediterranean and the Dead Sea, but yet it would come to its end and none would help it. I believe we're seeing probation about to close. We're seeing an accurate, literal and historic fulfillment of prophecy as the Muslim world is coming to its end. Shall we wake up before it's too late? We want to overcome as Jesus overcome, according to Revelation 3:21. Thank you very much. Any questions?